Do you think a human can randomly burst into flames, reduced to ashes with only feet or other outward appendages remaining? This happens, and it has happened a lot. Humans over the course of 300 years worldwide have recorded cases of people being seared off this world in mere moments. This of all things have made even scientists skeptical, and this is to be known as spontaneous human combustion, or also known as SHC. Let's start off with the first known case of SHC, a night in the 1400s. There are very few sources I could pull, but the story usually goes on like this. Polonius Vorstius was an Italian knight who was said to be ingesting strong wine before he, quote, shot flames from his mouth and then succumbed in flames before his parents. A notable similarity between these cases is that they're usually never witnessed by other people, which is often a factor that adds to its skepticism. Another case of spontaneous human combustion that I honestly don't see being talked about enough is a court case. Skipping to the 1700s, Jean Millet, husband of Nicole Millet, was arrested and accused of the murder of his wife. Mrs. Millet was the anomalous victim of SHC, and her remains were found by Mr. Millet at 2 a.m. near the kitchen's hearth. His case was appealed by a higher court and was ruled that the death of Mrs. Millet wasn't of murder. Unfortunately, Jean Millet, under the stress of losing his wife and the years he spent in prison, landed him in a hospital until he passed. Did I mention that some of these events are pretty sad? These events of spontaneous human combustion happen often enough for people to notice, but enough to almost feel like winning death's lottery for the most mysterious and probably most painful death. So let me tell you of the few facts that we know about SHC and the burning theory of what causes it. Theories first. People tend to go for the wick effect, like how a candle relies on the wax it has left before it's completely burnt out, only applied morbidly to humans. What supports this theory is a lack of environmental damage that's caused after a case of SHC, and the numerous reports of only the surface the victim is touching at the moment and the ceiling above being damaged. Only instead of melted wax, we get ashes, and the last point that would make this theory plausible is how victims would more often than not be near an ignition source. This theory also supports why the appendages are spared the damage. A lack of fat means a lack of fuel for the human candle. Victims tend to be elderly of age, with people theorizing that they are asleep or promptly dead before ignition, which explains the lack of destructive movement that the fire would make to its surroundings. Heavy drinkers and/or chain smokers are found to be most likely victims of SHC, given the potential for an ignition or fuel source. This also has evidence within most, if not all, cases of SHC. Despite how fantastical these stories may sound, it's a real thing, and I honestly have a hard time grasping why even scientists feel skeptical of it to this day. It's one of those irrational fears that you may develop as a child and then forget that you may not be as lucky, or rather unlucky, as you thought back then. Case in point, spontaneous human combustion, albeit a very rare occurrence, is a very real way to, well, leave this earth. And even without all this evidence to persuade you or me, I think I'd find it tragic yet funny that there may be a god that smites people who are too old, drink too much, or smoke. I think the moral of the story is, don't drink, don't smoke, and definitely don't sleep next to a fireplace. Anyways, I'm heading to bed.